you so much for having us. We're all excited to be here. We've been looking forward to it. Before we jump into the presentation, I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Sarah Rang. She's going to take a few moments off the top here just to introduce the Invasive Species Centre and get us going. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Jeff and Christy and Rebecca for your kind introduction to an opportunity to speak with you today. We really wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to give you a sense of invasive species in general. I know it's a growing interest for many municipalities across Ontario and especially in the Muskoka region. And, you know, as a result of a lot of the flooding that you recently experienced, you may be seeing increasing spread of invasive species as well. So I just wanted to really let you know that the Invasive Species Centre is here to help you. We have a number of different resources and we really welcome the discussion on what might be of most help. Just a brief overview, the Invasive Species Centre, we're a nonprofit group where our mission is really to help prevent invasive species on Canada's land and waters. We do that really by connecting stakeholders and sharing knowledge in terms of invasive species. This is our headquarters, which is in Sault Ste. Marie, but we have staff across the province and we really work, across the province and also across Canada. Next slide, please, Megan. And so we provide a variety of different services on our website. If you're curious about a particular invasives, we've got a lot of pictures and information on our species profile. We provide helpful best management practice guides. So if there's a particularly troublesome one, there's a best management practice guide. We offer free webinars where in an hour you can kind of learn a whole lot about an issue. There's video resources, a newsletter you can sign up for, which does, give.
Sarah, I think your volume is gone.
My audio has just canceled out pretty well. Certainly
yeah.
for Sarah.
Okay. Is that any better?
You're back now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll move myself a little closer. Yeah. So next slide, please, Megan. So this is
I'm having audio problems again.
Sarah, I can jump in if it's easier.
I think that's probably easier. I'm just about done anyway, so I'll pass it over to Megan.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So as Sarah was saying, we have our website is really chock full of really good resources to introduce yourself to invasive species if you're unfamiliar, and if you're more familiar, there's a lot of good content there. So please visit our website. The link is here and we can pass you all this information after the presentation. Quarterly newsletters, bi-weekly media scans, and all of our upcoming events. So it's all there for you on the website. So I'd encourage you to take a look at your own leisure. And we'll get into the good stuff now. Again, upcoming webinars. We have an update on beach leaf disease in Ontario coming 29th, so that's next Thursday. And new biological agents for managing invasive plants in Canada upcoming the next month, November 25th. And webinars are really ongoing. We do them quite frequently, so please keep up to date with things there if it's of interest to you. Just an overview of the different types of impacts that we speak about when we're introducing invasive species or speaking more generally about invasive species. So we typically tend to frame invasive species within one of the following three areas. So first, and probably most familiar to everybody, is in the ecological context. So species like water soldier, an aggressive spreading invasive aquatic plant, is a really classic example of invasive species inflicting major ecological damage on an ecosystem. So this plant rapidly grows and outcompetes other native and exotic plants and quickly shifts community away from being productive and biodiverse community. So it can really take over. So that's from the ecological perspective. Secondly, we frame invasive species in an economic context. So in the picture that's under the economic heading, you can see the picture is Phragmites. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Phragmites. This plant is commonly found clogging roadside drains, ditches, sometimes contributing to localized flooding. And even with regular control, this species can be very costly to manage. With typical roadside stands costing upwards of $1,100 per kilometer to control it. And lastly, the third way that we frame invasive species is through a human impact. They're often discussed with respect to their impact on humans that live among them. Here's a photo of another commonly found invasive plant, wild parsnip, which shares its ability to cause ultraviolet induced burns when the sap from this plant contacts exposed skin. So this roadside edge growing species is becoming much more common in central Ontario, making management a more regular addition to the work plans of municipal operations departments or whoever's working to manage the species. So those are sort of the three ways that we frame impacts of invasive species. And I'll pass it over to Colin now to talk about some trends in addressing invasive species.
That's great. Thanks, Megan. So, realizing that invasive species tends to kind of jump across a number of jurisdictional barriers, I guess, and boundaries, and also what subjects and fields we specifically tend to work in. I just wanted to give you a few slides just as a bit of, I guess, what's happened in the last 365 days, or what are some kind of emerging topics if you dabble in one set of species or another. So I've got 3 slides here I just want to speak to kind of quickly. It's not comprehensive in any way, but it just gives you kind of the greatest hits, I suppose, of what's going on at the federal, provincial, and community level too. So I did want to make note. So we've received notice that the federal water agency is progressing along. We don't have a full establishment of it, but I did want to pass along the note that a number of groups that we work with and the ISC have kind of championed the federal government to make sure that invasive species find their way within that agency once it's fully created and operational. So I did want to pass that along to the group as I think something to watch in the next 165 days going forward once that does become fully established. Did want to pass along too that we've seen some great work by Fisheries and Oceans Canada, or DFO, working on the invasive species file. Most notably, I think their work tends to focus in on things like Asian carp, a really significant threat to the Great Lakes region, and the $7 billion fishery that's associated with it. But we're also seeing them do some great work as well on outside of the kind of traditional areas that we tend to associate with DFO's great work on invasive species. So we're seeing more and more work around invasive plants as an example, starting to be more progressive on Phragmites as one example, a bunch of aquatic invasive species as well, zebra mussels and quagga mussels and other taxa too. So just wanted to make note of that we're starting to really encourage to see more and more work there happening. And other great work at the federal level, kind of a few great highlights in the last year that we're seeing from groups like the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which do have a significant role in invasive species, which some people are always a little bit surprised to hear, but they're doing some really great work on what's happening on the ground in terms of surveying for new invasive plants and pests of all kinds as well. So one quick highlight, a major milestone really of the last year was in June 2020. We saw them declare eradication on the Asian longhorn beetle, which is a really great success story of an established invasive species that was around the GTA, kind of right around Pearson Airport, really in Toronto, was kind of ground zero for that. That was a project that was more than 10 years in the making to go from initial detection to declaring eradication by CFIA. So really love to wave the banner, wave the flag when we see those great success stories. Another update that's happening with respect to CFIA that I wanted to pass along to was in summer 2019. So summer and a half ago, I suppose. We saw hemlock woolly adelgid detected for the first time in Ontario. That was around Wainfleet, Ontario, so Niagara region. And just want to pass that along. It is a significant threat to hemlock, a native tree. This invasive adelgid, this invasive insect, is really well established in many states, moving up from kind of Tennessee being its core range, all the way up now into New York State. Not widely distributed across New York State, still fairly patchy in its distribution, but we did find the first time detection in Ontario, just the last summer in 2019. So wanted to pass that along to you, especially because the Muskoka region has so many beautiful hemlocks. And another, interesting kind of headline, I guess I wanted to pass along there was oak wilt DNA. Oak wilt is an invasive pest that's been detected. It does impact all species of oak. Some oaks are more susceptible than others, but did want to pass along that although not confirmed to be detected in Ontario, we did pick up an eDNA detection. Now that species has been known for a couple of years to be very close to the Ontario and Michigan border. I think by my count, it's 573 meters, not kilometers, meters from the border in the Detroit area and Windsor, right on Belle Isle, which is an island right in between our province and Michigan. So did want to pass that on, that's getting very close. It still is close. Although we certainly wouldn't expect it to pop up for the first time in the Muskoka region, it's something I did want to pass along to you to be aware of. Thanks. Something on the provincial scale I wanted to pass along. In 2015, we did have the Ontario Invasive Species Act, which received royal assent in 2015. And so that's been around for a few years now, but there were an initial group of species that were listed under the regulations associated with that. But did want to pass along in terms of a new update on that, we did see an environmental registry post, I guess it was in April, I think that post closed, that proposed the regulation and sought public consultation on 16 new species. So the initial species, we did see things like Phragmites and water soldier, and new species that are have not been added or regulated, but are under consideration are things like wild boar, wild pigs in Ontario. So a neat, interesting kind of new development, more to come on that, I hope to see. And did want to flag to your attention as well that under that same ERO post, that recreational watercraft were being considered as a potential pathway for regulation under that. So that would be a really interesting development. It would align Ontario with some other jurisdictions as well. So just want to flag to your attention as maybe something to watch. A few months ago as well, we did notice that a new live bait policy was released in Ontario. Live bait is certainly a pathway for the spread of invasive species, and so I did want to flag to your attention as well that there were some interesting new items associated with that live bait policy update. It's been a long time in the making, so really pleased to see some nice concrete actions to mitigate that pathway. And some other provinces are doing great work as well. Did want to flag to your attention that both Saskatchewan and Alberta continue to be very strong on the watercraft inspection program side of things, as well as Saskatchewan releasing a new aquatic invasive species strategy this past summer too. So lots of fun things, exciting things happening in the field. And what's happening at the community level? Well, the last few years, and certainly Muskoka's will up to speed on this, is that great work on kind of realizing that municipalities are really this leader in invasive species because they're on the ground and dealing with the problems of the established species. So we've got communities like London and Mississauga and Toronto having their biodiversity strategy, releasing and council approved invasive species strategies. So multiple species being associated in there. Those strategies are focusing on priority areas on the ground, particular parts of their communities, particular species that are priorities for them. Really interesting and certainly kind of leading edge, I think, on what municipalities are doing in Ontario around invasive species and how their council and municipal structures are kind of backing them up. So just wanted to pass along some notes there, many strategies still in prep all across the province, but those are the three great examples I wanted to let you know of. And we're also seeing at the community level too, some really nice progressive work happening on what the next big species are. So Windsor being a great example of a community that's starting to get their staff and their community aware and trained on what does oak wilt as an example look like? What are the early detection signs and symptoms we should be aware of and looking for? And kind of similar to that in terms of the role of the community in Ontario, we saw a misidentification, so it was not a true confirmation of the species, it was a false report of spotted lanternfly in Mississauga just this past summer too. That's a really interesting species. It's not in Ontario yet either, similar to oak wilt, but something we're very much aware of because it will have significant considerations at the community level. And just wanted to pass that along because it was a really neat example of, although it was not a correct report of the species, not found in Mississauga, the initial report was, and it triggered a bunch of quite a few kind of stages of active response. So I did want to pass that along as well. And so, you know, I'm going to speak to you, I guess, about the role of the community, the role of the municipality and conservation authorities and those community-grounded groups in addressing invasive species in Ontario here. And I wanted to frame this up in a way that I think is really important here. It's this idea of this invasion curve, which we cite in the literature. And it's, you know, it's a very kind of intuitive thought, being that the earlier we can catch something, the more cost-effective and the more ecologically effective we are at addressing the threat of a new invasive species. So if you look bottom left there, the green part of the graph showing species arrival, that's what we're trying to catch these things. Whether it's spotted lanternfly, oakquill, hemlock woolly adelgid, we love to find the first versions, the first populations of these or individuals of these species, because we have a much higher rate of economic return, as well as higher probability of actually having a great end story. So Meg, if you could flip to the next one there. Just wanted to give you a few examples of what species those can look like when they're plotted out on this chart. So species like oakquill, Megan mentioned off the top there, water soldier, you know, being really early detection species that we really want to try and drive community change and action on. Whereas we see, you know, not to say that they don't deserve or require a lot of effort, but species like Phragmites and emerald ash borer, once they become established to that level, economic returns do tend to go down. So, you know, different organizations, whether it's at the federal, provincial, or community level, have different roles in the kind of overall part of this invasion curve. And at the community level, this is really about championing and driving action on those species that are established in our community, like Phragmites, like emerald ash borer, which I'll speak to in a few more minutes. Next slide, please, Meg. Thanks. So a few examples here of what that looks like at the community level. Species, unfortunately, we're all very familiar with. You know, a great example of this streetscape being modified, upper left picture there. Ash trees removed due to emerald ash borer, having to be replaced. Significant costs associated with that, which I'm sure you're well aware of. Costs that our municipalities in Ontario were not prepared to have to face the burden of, as emerald ash borer moves quite quickly throughout the province. Another example here, municipal assets, you know, things like stormwater management facilities here, having to be addressed from Phragmites. It's a great example of a species, unfortunately, we're all very familiar with too. Meg cited that number off the top there, $1,100 per linear kilometer of roadside management for municipalities. That, you know, we have a lot of roads in our municipalities, as you're certainly familiar with, a lot of kilometers of drainage ditches, and Phragmites, as it becomes more and more established, those costs just tend to increase. Another well-cited example is something like a zebra mussel or quagga mussels. We have municipal assets like water intake facilities as well, and pipes that are need to be managed or replaced. So just some kind of very usual suspect examples here I wanted to frame this up in. Meg, if you could keep going. And so what I wanted to speak to today was a report that we issued in 2019 with a partner, Richard Vine, who's a professor at University of Guelph. And he's an environmental economist, so he's worked in agriculture and a few other systems here, but really what we wanted to do is try and understand what are the costs of invasive species being incurred at the municipal and community level here in Ontario. Because, you know, we understand at a very high level, whether it's national figures, like, you know, tens of billions at the North American level, all the way up to hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, depending on what industries or resources we're filtering in. But we really don't understand, like, how does that translate down to the community level, at a ratepayer level, individual level, municipal level, conservation authority, or watershed level? How much are we having to pay by these established species? And so what we wanted to do was try and tease out some of that data. So in terms of methodology, what we did was propose a survey to 444 municipalities in Ontario. We ended up getting responses from about a quarter of them. And we did the same thing for conservation authorities too, and we got about responses from 45% of them as well. So really decent sample size here of what these communities are reporting to spend on individual species, as well as protecting different asset types as well, and where they're spending. Are they spending money on prevention, signage? Are they spending money on actual, you know, remediation or removal processes as well? Meg, if you could keep going there. So the first thing I wanted to get across to you is answering that question: where are we spending our money at the community level on invasive species? And certainly, as we would hope and kind of predict, I think the data bears out that most of the money is being spent here in the control and management side of things, as opposed to the prevention. And this is happening across, we're basically able to tease out the survey to public works groups, people who are doing roadside management, aquatics groups, natural areas groups, people people who are working in forestry and parks within a municipality or a region. And so it's just interesting to see that at the municipal level, most of this money is being spent, as you predict, on species that we're being forced to address. You know, things like roadside ditches and Phragmites kind of stopping water movement, especially in more flat parts of the province like southwestern Ontario. You know, municipalities are really having to incur a high degree of expense to manage those assets and make sure water is moving properly across your landscape. So if you fast forward there, Meg, so that was the big takeaway, is control and management is really what's driving the investment at the municipal level here, with more than 80% typically, depending on what department we're looking at. You know, 70 to 80% of expenses that are invested in invasive species going there. And on to the next slide, please, Meg. Now, it's kind of interesting too, and I think, you know, this might bear out in some of your communities, no doubt, is just, you know, who within each of those divisions or departments, where are we spending the money specifically, just beyond, you know, aside from that kind of stage of invasion, where are we spending that money? Is it in-house projects? Is it out-of-house projects? So we asked that question as well. And there were some interesting trends that popped out to our eye as well. And I think this really clearly tells the story, is that municipalities are doing things like roadside engagement on frag, you know, chopping down emerald ash borer trees that become hazard trees as well. And so, you know, most of those expenses tend to manifest themselves in payments to contractor and external projects as well. And this totally aligns well with, we're doing our training workshops and trying to drive up community capacity on invasive species. This tends to be the story that we're hearing as well. So it's kind of interesting to see that bear out in the data. So, you know, a large number of projects are happening out of house by municipality, coordinated by a municipality in many cases, but ultimately the work on the ground, as you might expect, tends to be done by those external contractors. And we do see some more happening engagement as well. That's good there, Meg, thank you. So what I did want to note to you is give you a little bit of an assignment here and ask you to kind of do some predictive work with me. So this is a chart I'm going to show you here that I pulled straight from the report. And what I wanted to just walk you through very quickly what it looks like. So what you're going to see in the first column there under invasive species are just species names. And they're going to be ranked by the amount of investment that municipalities are investing in them. So we'll see the most expensive species first. We'll see the second and third and fourth, all the way down to the bottom, which are species that are not invested in this quite as much. And what this report does do is break it down by municipality and by conservation authority. So we're asking the same questions effectively for both of those audiences. And before we go too far here, actually, Meg, could you advance one more slide, please? I'm going to give you the answer on these are the top 5 invasive species, but you know, let's give you a bit of a quiz here. What do you think? The question is, what do you think is the most expensive invasive species to manage for all of Ontario's municipalities? Gypsy moth, it might be a good year for it. You know, do we have Phragmites, certainly one that you're well familiar with, zebra mussel, quagga mussel, emerald ash borer being another one. You know, it's the answer is one of those 5. I ask you, what is the most expensive species? All right, lock in your bets. Okay, Meg. Next slide, please. Sorry, one more. Sorry, can we do one more? There we go. All right, the grand winner is emerald ash borer. So anybody who guessed DAB, congratulations. And I did want to bring your attention that it is the dominant driver of species investment across Ontario municipalities. So all of the municipalities that reported what is your number 1 species, you know, this was a big driver. So more than 50%, I think it's 53% of all municipal expenses are related to emerald ash borer as an individual species, which just blew my mind, to be honest with you. Now, those costs are things like chopping down infested ash trees, surveying for emerald ash borer, replacing those trees. These are really important green assets that are fixtures of our streetscapes and of our landscapes as well. And so most of this investment here is just in removing a small overall percentage of the ash trees that are there and impacted by EAB. But I think it's a great case study in how expensive one species can become. So Nick, if you can flip forward to the next one there. So we do see another nice bin of species. So sorry, just to flush out that top 5, I think that's where a nice threshold stops at about 1.25 million being Phragmites. And then we see a bit of a kind of, you know, the next wave of species, things like wild parsnip, a great example of a roadside management species. Buckthorn, unfortunately, one I'm sure you're familiar with. Dog strangling vine, yet again, another species that's afflicting the Muskoka region. things like Japanese knotweed as well. And it seems to be a nice crisp line there between garlic mustard and then the usual, the other species below that. So Meg, if you could advance one more time, please. Thanks. So we see a, kind of a collection of the miscellaneous species here. So it's interesting to see generally what I read when I look at this is all of these species are well-established species with a few notable exceptions, things like Asian longhorn beetle, which we've eradicated from Ontario. But other species, oak wilt, Asian carp, those are not established species. But the vast majority of species on this list that municipal partners and conservation authorities and community partners are investing their time and effort and resources into tend to be those established ones. So it's interesting. A lot of those trends are starting to bear out. Next slide, please, Nick. So, if you're trying to take one or two figures out of here, I wanted to give you a feel for the big question, which is overall at a provincial scale, how much are we spending on invasive species at the community level? How much are our ratepayers having to spend? And we modeled this out in a few different ways, but glad to see here that basically they all tell the same story regardless of specifically what model we choose. They all tend to be really tightly aligned, which is a great news story when you're doing some modeling. So, I think the best takeaway I can give you to the answer to the question of how much do we spend at the community level in the province of Ontario, it's about $50 million, somewhere between $51 and $52 million per year for this study. And the interesting thing is too here is that we had actually done a similar kind of a preliminary survey to municipalities back in 2017, and they ended up giving us a very similar response. So we were within $5 million between the two times we ran the survey back in 2017 and then again replicated it in 2019 with a larger sample size. So really interesting to see that those numbers are tight together. That gives us yet again a higher degree of confidence that these numbers are really quite accurate and certainly right within the right ballpark. Next slide, please, Meg. Sorry, one more. Thanks. So four statistics to leave you off with here. If we're thinking about this on an individual level, which is obviously how a lot of us kind of interact with our environment and connect with it, and it's a more digestible way, we took this data down and we asked basically on a per capita level, if we're having that conversation one-on-one with an Ontario ratepayer community member, how much are we spending per person? About the cost of a medium coffee at Tim's. $1.98 per person per year is how much we're investing just through our municipalities and conservation authorities on invasive species. Those are established species. That doesn't capture things like the cost at the federal level that I talked about, emerald ash borer, Asian longhorn beetle eradication, Asian carp detection and survey work. It doesn't capture those things. Just on a community level, it's costing us about $2 per person per year. The next, if we look at that on a municipalities level here, we're looking at about $220,000 per municipality across the province. Now there's vast variability between municipality A, B, and C. No doubt, I'm sure you'd expect that. There's large size differences on municipalities. There's some species that just aren't affecting certain communities in certain ways. But if we average it out, it's about $220,000 per municipality. So it's a very good high level figure to throw out. Onto, again, I say we did survey conservation authorities in Ontario as well as part of the survey and count them in a different category. And it's interesting to see they're spending a little bit more. So each conservation authority, again, very variable between conservation authorities, but is investing on the scale of $315,000 per year. And again, the one kind of high level, if you're looking for a one-liner on this, $51 million per across the whole province annually here. Meg, if you don't mind flipping forward a couple, then that's roughly what we're spending at the provincial scale. So no doubt a very costly collection of species here, and something that justifies concern and justifies the attention that it's getting. So Meg, if you can flip forward one more for me, please. I just wanted to leave you off with this here. We have posted this on our website. So this report, if you're looking for something, or if you're looking for a one-page fact sheet that just kind of details this information at a very high level, what are those 3 or 4 key takeaways? Where are we spending money at the community level on invasive species in Ontario over the last few years? The fact sheet's a great thing. I'd encourage you to consider stapling it to your website. We've got lots of hard copies. If when the in-person event day comes around again, we'd be happy to set you up with as many of those as possible, because I think it's a really important survey that kind of contextualizes a lot of our work at the Invasive Species Centre, as well as a lot of the work that's happening, certainly within your community as well. So with that in mind, I wanted to pass the controls back over to Meg here, and off we go.
Great, thanks, Colin. So now that we sort of have a better idea of the economic picture of the impacts of invasive species, I want to shift the conversation towards tools that you can have in your toolbox as you manage this in your area. So some quick ideas for invasive species mitigation. You know, things like you want to do something but you have a budget of $0, or you don't have anything planned. These are sort of some quick things that already are in existence and that we think might be able to help. So the first thing, a webinar series, online training and videos. So the ISC, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, runs a monthly webinar series covering a range of species and different topics, pathways and policies that are free for public use. Many of our partners use them for internal training purposes or professional development for their staff, and some even cross-promote them on their website for social media. So, all of our previous webinars are recorded and available for you to view, and then the upcoming webinars that I mentioned previously. So that's all there for you. Technical resources, the ISC and a range of our different partners have developed quite a few options for technical products that can help mitigate the impacts of invasive species. We have the Clean Equipment Protocol for Industry, and that was created by our partners at the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. Some project managers have even begun including them as a requirement when you're developing requests for proposals in areas that are particularly at risk to invasive species introduction that would require some use of heavy equipment. So again, those are available on our website, more technical resources, and some online resources that we have as well. The Invasive Species Centre has produced a fact sheet series that's available to be posted or linked on your website. So it's a shareable resource. We encourage sharing it. It includes sort of nice one-page summaries with some sort of nice graphics explaining invasive species and a number of topics. So we have fact sheets covering the linkage between invasive species and species at risk, climate change, municipal asset protection, and quite a few others. So I encourage you to take a look at those. They're quite useful just for getting sort of an overview of a topic. There's some other options, of course, for addressing invasive species, some more enhanced options, I like to say them as. Some, if we start with municipal strategies, some municipalities, parks, conservation authorities are developing their own invasive species strategies themselves to help improve their response to different priority species. And to help make the most of these more comprehensive efforts, the Invasive Species Centre partnered with the Ontario Invasive Plant Council back a few years ago in 2015 to create a how-to guide for developing invasive species strategies. So that resource is available, sort of a how to create a municipal strategy. And this framework can be a really helpful resource and starting point if you are thinking about how to develop a policy to inform when you intervene in invasive species issues in your community. And sort of the second enhanced option that I want to introduce is our very own Invasive Species Centre Community of Practice. So I'll introduce that now in a little bit more detail. So the Invasive Species Community of Practice is targeted towards municipal practitioners, and it's an online virtual forum. So there's a couple different pieces that we use. We use this graphic to help explain all the different functions of the community of practice. So we have an online discussion forum for networking and sharing information. We have an area where we have best practices and access to tools. Many of the tools I just spoke about are available on the online platform as well. Technical resource sharing and educational and training events. So it's really a catch-all for anything that municipal practitioners or municipal landowners, municipal land managers would need if they're sort of looking to where to start with managing invasive species. So a range of resources from sort of the quicker things that I mentioned previously and then the more enhanced options. So there's a lot there. Just to give you a really quick overview of what the community of practice is all about. The opportunity for the community of practice creation really came about when we realized that there was a lack of a central platform for cross-municipal invasive species management practitioners. So, there are a lot of species-specific groups that exist. There's a special group for oak wilt, Phragmites, etc. But it might be difficult to navigate these existing groups, and we wanted a central space where we could, in fact, also enhance what these other groups were doing. Over the coming months, the network of practitioners who work to address invasive species will be forced to shift how we collectively address the problem. Like all of us have, we've had to adjust to doing most of our work items online. So how we address this problem, at least in the short term, is going to be very different. And we wanted to create a space where, you didn't need that face-to-face interaction to share that knowledge. And so now we brought it to an online virtual space. It's sort of like a Reddit meets LinkedIn for invasive species, if that comparison helps you understand what it might be like. And we really do encourage collaboration, and in fact, that is its primary function, to collaborate across municipalities with different municipal representatives that are involved at the local level. So there's no cost to access this platform, and registration for all municipal and conservation authority staff is now open. So if you go to our website, there is a tab that you can see. It says Community of Practice, and it's quite easy to register. You can have full access in just a few short moments. And the last thing I wanted to mention, and I'm really excited to sort of talk to you about, is the Invasive Species Centre support services. So, are you faced with invasive species challenges that require a little bit more expertise or capacity than you currently have available? Then we're very much available to help with that. The Invasive Species Centre support services project engages our own existing expertise and capitalizes on our broad network of practitioners, policymakers, and academics, all of our partners, to build really strong teams and provide those professional services in invasive species prevention and management. So the ISCSS, as we've been short-terming it will offer a variety of services for various client groups, including land managers, municipalities, First Nations, and the private sector. And on our website, all this information is available with a really detailed list of services that we are able to offer. But if generally speaking, we have planning, response and management tools and plans, events, training and outreach, policy, impact assessment, consultation services, diagnostic and insect ID services, and a lot of additional services, including project management and things like that. So, this is just sort of a very quick mention that the ISCSS is available to help in a more professional capacity if you have invasive species needs that require some more detail and expertise. So, if you have an idea, or even if you just want to chat about what we can offer, separate email, and the information's all on the website, but please feel free to get in touch with us that way as well. services@invasivespeciescentre.ca. And I'm just going to pass it over to Colin to sort of end us off. I'll speak a little bit about the path forward in invasive species. I'll pass this to Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. Yeah, so we're all trying to find ways to modify our approach here and see how we can be most effective. But did want to end off on a few notes in terms of looking forward. It's been an interesting year. So I'm sure you came across the murder hornet stories. It's hard to escape those headlines. I'm glad we certainly don't have those in Ontario, but and not that far from Canada. So something to watch out for. And in classic 2020 form, of course, the gypsy moth, a high volume year comes around as well. So I'm sure it's something you've seen, you've come across, and hopefully found ways to work around. So did want to highlight that the ISC also kind of a pretty interesting take, I think, on how we're trying to approach community engagement and make lemonade out of lemons here. But we did just launch a gypsy moth egg scraping contest too. So the information for that's on our website. So basically just trying to encourage people and train people how to go out and scrape their oak trees for gypsy moth eggs. It's a good way to kind of keep engaged in the issue and keep our distance as well. It's been interesting to see as well, just we've had record attendance, especially around our Gypsy Moth webinar as well, but just at other webinars as well. So did want to kind of reiterate that as an interesting opportunity to come engage in the issue. And you know, still seeing some nice opportunities in terms of this being a path forward for record engagement. You know, I'm sure the stories have come across your desk as well as mine, but just record years in terms of attendance. If you've tried to get a campsite this summer, I think you know what I'm talking about. So, you know, I think we're optimistic. We're seeing this as an opportunity to continue to engage people in the environment and in the issue that's closest, nearest to our heart, with being invasive species as well. So with that in mind, we did have a couple questions. You know, having a group of your expertise and capacity together, we didn't want to miss on the opportunity just to pick your brain a little bit. But you know, did want to open up the opportunity as well. Should you have any questions or areas of interest or species of interest, you know, feel free to float those out as questions as well. So maybe if we do have a couple minutes, maybe I see we've got a few comments in the chat box, which I've not been watching very closely. Apologies, but if you do have any questions, maybe take opportunity to jot those down. But you know, did want to, you know, pick your brain as well a little bit here. If you have any gaps, it's always an interesting question. I think we're trying to understand people in the community, especially in the Muskoka area. You know, what are the challenges you're facing here around invasive species? You know, the communities that you live within, is it technical knowledge on the staffing level? Is it kind of political capacity and support? Is it just capacity on staffing? Is it mandate? You know, aside from budget, which always seems to be the good gap, but any thoughts on that, I guess, in terms of issues you can identify for us to try and find a way to jump in on?